friends, and welcome to day 12 of our Transform series. For today's session, we will be looking at 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, just to give you some context about 2 Timothy, Paul probably was arrested sometime after writing 1 Timothy and Titus, so he wrote his second letter to Timothy from Rome, where he was in prison. In this letter, Paul seems to know that he will never be released from prison and that he will soon die. This is why he writes to Timothy. Paul expresses his desire to see Timothy again and encourages Timothy to continue the missionary work after his death. He gives Timothy more instructions on how to lead a church and warns him to stay away from false teachers. He urges Timothy to be faithful to true Christians' teachings. Now, Paul and Timothy, they were partners in sharing the gospel and the good news of God. Friends, God has entrusted us all with at least one gift to fulfill our purposes in life. And there will come a time in our lives where, just like Timothy, we will simply have to step up to the plate. In this passage, Paul sees that the timidity that is in Timothy. Timothy knows the fear that he has within him. But God wants Timothy to know that this fear does not come from God. Now let's break down the verse. For God has not given us a spirit of fear. Friends, we all face situations where we feel timid and afraid. For some, speaking in front of others makes them fear. Others are afraid of confrontation. Others of being made to look foolish. Others are afraid of rejection. We all deal with fear in some stage of our lives. The first step in dealing with such fear is to understand that the fear does not come from God. To be able to say, this isn't God making me feel like this. God hasn't given me this. Perhaps it is from your personality, perhaps it's a weakness of the flesh, perhaps a demonic attack, but it isn't from God. The second step is dealing with such fear is understanding what God has given us. What is that? A spirit of? God has given us a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. God has given us a spirit of power. When we are doing His work, proclaiming His word, representing His kingdom, we are safe in His hands. And I just want to say that again. When we are doing His work and proclaiming His word, representing His kingdom, that's when God gives us His power. The second one is God has given us a spirit of love. This tells us a lot about the power that God has given us. Many think of power in terms of how much we can control others, but Jesus' power is expressed in how much we can love and serve one another. Remember Jesus on the night before the cross. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given him such powers into his hands, what did he do with that power? In John 13 verse 1 to 11, it talks about where God washed his disciples' feet. He served his disciples. The third one is God has given us a sound mind. The Greek word here has the idea of a calm, self-controlled mind, in contrast to the panic and confusion that rushes on us when we are in a fearful situation. We don't need to accept what God has not given us. And what is that? A spirit of fear, as we sometimes stop and just ponder here. But rather we need to humbly receive and walk in what God has given us. And what might that be? God has given us a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. Boldness matters. Without it, we can't fulfill God's purpose for our lives. Life is an adventure. God's purpose for you is more than making money, being entertained, and being comfortable. It is for you to use the gifts that He has given you to touch His people and help a needy world. Fear and timidity will keep you from using these gifts God has given you to touch His people and a needy world. God wants you to take His power, His love, and His calm thinking and overcome fear to be used for Him and with all the gifts He has given. Friends, now don't you want to take some time to just think about what was discussed this morning and apply it to your lives?